This is the 1 hour capsule.
Let me tell you why you're here. You're here because you know something. What you know you can't explain, but you feel it.
Alright, guys. So we are here in episode 8 of the 1 hour capsule podcast, and we have two great guests today. Previous guests, we had Ryan Coelho, who was on a previous episode podcast, and we were talking about spiritual concepts. I don't know, we just went on a rant about spiritual concepts, which we usually do.
hmm
Uh,
Hey, everybody. Sorry, are we live?
and we are
Yeah.
live.
Well, hey, everybody.
And then our last episode, episode 7, we have Farah Rodrigues, who is back.
Hello, hello. So happy to be back.
And in that podcast, we talked about human trafficking and other topics. And so when I was having that episode with Farah, I was listening to her and the things that we were talking about. And right away, I thought, like, you know what? Like, this conversation here should be very well complemented by having Ryan Coelho, which I know very well, is delved into the topics. And there seems to be so many, as Farah was saying a little bit earlier when we were talking about synchronicities with you guys, the two of you. One of them being you guys were born in the same place, apparently, in Goa. You guys are both Goans, and I don't know if that's what it is.
Were you born?
It's the Goan connection.
Goa, Ryan?
I know I wasn't. I was born in Canada. So I'm the Canadian, Indo-Canadian token brown guy, and then you can be the Indian Canadian token brown girl.
Exactly. Not
or
Canadian
woman,
yet. So hopefully in the next 4 months, but not Canadian yet. I'm pieces of other parts. If people ask me, where are you from, Farah? And I'm like, that's a loaded question. What do you mean exactly? What do I relate to? My skin tone, where I grew up, where I live right now. So I was born in Dubai. My background is Goan. Born in Dubai. I grew up in Africa. So I was in Africa for 16 years. And then I moved to Canada about 11 years ago. So just like, and my stepdad's Italian, so I speak Italian. So I'm like a little piece of all continents, except for Australia. But yeah.
So okay, so I just got a little bit sidetracked in my head there, but yeah. So I as I mentioned before, in the last podcast we were talking about human trafficking, but we just write it down. I was thinking like, Farah, you were talking about like the positive aspects of sexual energies, and because we talk about the negative being human trafficking and slavery and all that, and tantric sex was mentioned, and I gotta say, like, it's one of the in the episodes that I've been in as a host, Tierno. It's one of the ones that actually been very eye-opening, and just listening to it and just starting to become very interested about the topic. So I want, because you two guys have spoken to me in the past, Farah, you last episode, and Ryan, multiple conversations about tantric sex. You guys are both delve into it and just talk about who wants to start by defining what it is. You guys want to duke it out?
Well, I have a question actually, because I'm curious about you, right? Because I guess on this podcast we're going to get to know each other a little bit. But I'm curious to know. So because I see, you've studied quite a bit of Taoism, like how, and then you then came into Tantra. I'd love to hear your story, get to know you a little bit.
Yeah, sure. So Taoism is sort of something I kind of fell into through Alan Watts. So Alan Watts, he's kind of like my spiritual father, I guess. I have two, him and Paulo Coelho, but Paulo Coelho is more by force of habit because he has the same last name as me. Whereas Alan Watts is more about the content. And so I can't say there was any particular, like, this is the direction of my interest for a long time. It was just, I've always been in leadership stuff, and it's in high school, and just kind of liked the idea of thinking about humans as a plane. Like, I was an aerospace engineer, and so when I worked at Bombardier, their slogan was "giving people wings." And when I was working on projects there, it seemed very you're focusing on like some sort of mechanical plane. There's no relationship between you and the plane. And so that's what didn't really keep me engaged in that work, is you're just kind of working on this quote unquote non-sentient dead piece of object. Whereas when you take
Mhm.
the same knowledge and problem solving that you would do in aerospace engineering and apply it to people, it's fascinating because not only are you working with the brain of the human body, just like you would work with like a main central computer of an airplane and what surrounds it. I try to, I guess the difference, big difference I've come is even though I subscribe to Taoism, I, kind of agree with what a lot of Alan Watts talks about. I don't take on any standard terms in terms
Mhm.
of I fully move in that direction. So when I hear the word tantric, for me,
Mhm.
I haven't really studied it, but it's almost like my understanding, the way I interpret that word will likely not be according to the definition of it. Um,
Mhm.
um, and that's been sort of throughout everything. Like, I don't necessarily agree with the chakra system, although the chakra system is important in understanding um, an aspect. If we think of it from like aspects of a holistic whole, you
Mhm.
can look at it from one direction as seven chakras, or you can look at it from another direction as a solar plexus. And the tantric
Mhm.
energy is about how do you continue to make the distinctions between these different ways of viewing it smaller and smaller. So when you're looking at the solar plexus and the seven chakras, how do those kind of work together? And then that gives you a greater understanding of what we would say tantric potentially means based on
Mhm.
the experience. So I don't, if I don't use terms properly, feel free to just let me know what the actual commonly known definition is. But for the most part, I try to just approach it from a rational way using
Mhm.
words I'm already familiar with rather than trying to get caught up in like here's a great example, and not to sidetrack the conversation. This
Mhm.
whole defund police thing is hilarious because you're saying defund the police, but the actual thing you want to do is see the funds go towards better things within the police system, right? So,
Mhm.
or go be redistributed out to community programs to help with victims. But
Mhm.
nothing is being talked about when you say defund police, even in that word that says educate police better, give them better training, or put
Mhm.
it towards programs that are actually going to reduce crime. Nothing in that comes out of defund police.
No,
So when people say
exactly.
to me, defund police, you got to come to the rally, I'm like, go fuck yourself. Oh, are we allowed to swear? I'm literally like, don't talk to me because you're just going along with this thing, and
Mhm.
it's so hypocritical, that whole space. And why I keep a lot of my thoughts private is uh,
Mhm.
recently Terry Crews, the guy from Brooklyn Nine-Nine, he basically said, we have to hold Black Lives Matter accountable for their actions, the leadership. And everyone went off him and said, like, okay, you're against Black Lives Matters. You're not a proper Black person, whatever the hell that means.
Mhm.
And like,
Mhm.
you have no opinion. You're not allowed to talk. And it's like, okay. So what I'm trying to get at is like, my encouragement for this conversation is let's not get lost too much in like the predefined ways of looking at things,
Mhm.
and just help each other clarify if there is a
Mhm.
commonly known way of seeing things. Let's just keep the audience in mind and then just adapt to
Mhm.
that language,
I
but
guess,
I
I
love
guess
that.
like for
not get
me
stuck in that
when I,
language.
for me
Mhm.
when I look for names and definitions, I what I come from is that I have heard about tantric sex many years ago, but it's something that you hear about and like somebody defines it for you and you're like, okay, that's interesting, but you never really get to like unpack what that is really, or even like practice it, which is
Mhm.
actually what you should be doing, I suppose, if you want to really know what it's about. And so when I come in, Ryan, from the point of view of definitions, I'm speaking from the point of view of a noob, a newbie who is
A new
like looking
Right.
listener.
to understand more about it, and also because this is a public like podcast. We want also people, if we consider, I believe, I mean, it sounds like there's a promise, because I at the very least I've heard from directly from the two of you about it, that there's a promise, that there is a potential for a practice, if you want to call it that, if it's appropriate to call it that, that
Mhm.
will involve, impact people positively. Because that's, for me, that's what I'm all about. It's just like trying to see how we can impact ourselves and or people positively. Because why not? If there's
Mhm.
something that exists out there, um and then like when I talk about other people about, like I mentioned, like, oh, tantric sex, and then there's a lot of people who's like never heard of it, you know.
Mhm.
Right.
It makes me wonder, like, also in
So what would
is
you
it
say, like Norman, what like as someone who's a newbie maybe to that? For me, I'm gonna
Mhm.
call it holistic sex, if that's okay, because tantric I don't relate to as much. So just that's how I may refer to it, but it's this sort of the same idea that I guess Farah will also touch
Mhm.
upon. But Norman, what comes to mind when it comes to like what are you curious about? Because I feel like this conversation can go in so many directions because at the end of the day, it's talking about
Yeah,
energy, and energy is
yeah.
frequency, and
Okay,
there's
okay. Let me
infinite
frame
amounts
it.
of frequency, right? So
Let me
give us a
let me
direction,
frame,
maybe.
sure. Let me frame it this way, right? Like, I think, I mean, I think this is a choice, but in a monogamic relationship where you're just one man and one person, because let's not call it male and female.
Right.
I know one person with another person, and they decide to be together and share this experience that is, the sexual experience, because it's a very important component of a relationship, right? Of a relationship, couple relationship. And from my perspective is, I'm in a relationship right now, and I obviously want this relationship to succeed and to be good, and to be the source of, not just fulfillment, but also like, helping each other out in this life experience. If I can find a way, and let it be tantric sex, holistic sex, be something that, if I delve into it and if I understand it and if I practice, will enhance my relationship, my couple
So
relationship.
what's your current perspective when you hear tantric sex or holistic sex? Like what comes to mind in like in general, and then maybe how it applies to your relationship experience, like overall, like sort of the trend, or like what would you say? Um, what stands out to you about the whole field itself?
Well, I think when we were talking about with Farah in the last episode, we're talking about how, like, we have preconceptions about like what sex is, and we have things like pornography that sort of like, in a lot of the times, probably most of the time, gives us the very wrong way in which sex is used. And even to the point where, like, those actresses and people that are participating in those videos or whatever content are even like sex slaves. So it's like, so never mind, like, it's portraying sex, I think, in a negative way, downplaying the role of women, for example. But also, even some of them are actually forced to do those videos, which is just another level of bad, I'm gonna say. uh, what I want, what I how I see holistic sex is like trying to get to the quote unquote right way, most appropriate way, most spiritual way, that will, partake in my spiritual growth. I believe, if I were to frame sex from the holistic point of view, as opposed to just doing it because of my own experience, or maybe the things that I hear from people, or the things that I've seen in porn, which I think, could be something that I can improve by, taking a more, let's say, holistic approach. Does that Did I explain myself?
Mhm.
Yeah, like maybe Farah, do you want to
Yeah, for sure.
start
And
us with?
I love everything that's been put in so far, Ryan. I love what you were creating around. I think I read. I love what you were creating around the wording of things.
Mm.
I think it was in New Earth that I read. When you give a name to something, it actually diminishes what's possible.
Mm,
Like it actually takes away from discovering something for yourself,
right. You come to the
right?
assumption of it before you.
Exactly, right? And before you named the chair a chair, it could have been a toy, it could have been a table, it could have been a coat hanger,
Well, it
and it's
reminds me of
so
Little Prince, right? When he kept showing those pictures in the begin, the picture to adults, and they kept saying, "Oh, it's a hat." And he's like, "No, it's a snake that ate an elephant." And you're
right.
like, "Oh yeah,
I've
it's true."
I've never read A Little Prince. I
Oh,
know that's
don't read it.
probably the
Watch the
worst,
Netflix
but
movie. It's probably better.
okay, good.
A lot
But
less, a
yeah,
lot easier.
and but that's the way I look at it, and it's the same thing with the conversation for tantra. I think I've been looking at different forms of tantra, specifically right now Tibetan tantra. And Norman, I love what you were sharing as well. And really looking at sex as a tool to optimize how we function in life, as well as our spirituality, like really starting to use our sexual energy to tap into our spiritual journey on this planet. And I'm a big yes to these conversations. When where I often share this. I heard this once from somebody, and I was like, oh my God, this is so brilliant. What I'm about to share is not the truth, or what I share is not the truth.
Right.
And I always put that in there because it is not the truth. I don't believe.
Well, it's
that
funny. The word "truth" automatically
I know.
implies that there's a lie. So it's like,
It's exactly right.
but
So
everyone seems like, the right way, the right
this
path, and
is
you're like, that
exactly
implies wrong. So you're not working within you can't work
No.
within a non-dualistic environment.
Yeah. So a lot of the times I remove the morality from the conversation. So I remove the right and wrong, and really where I start to look at is, okay, so this is one way of doing things, and these are the impacts, and this is another way of doing things, and these are the impacts, and that's it. And depending on what kind of impact you want to cause for yourself, you choose the path, right? So that's just one piece I wanted to put in there.
Nice.
And then when it comes to Tantra, something, I love what you were sharing, Norman, about, in couple, like tantric sex. The way that I see Tantra is really, it's an individual journey, actually, is how I see it. It can absolutely involve your partner. It could involve multiple partners, but it really is, what I've been discovering over the last 5 years is how to generate pleasure within my body, and then begin to infuse it into the areas of life, into all areas of my life. So my health, my vitality, my projects, my love life, aligning myself for what it is that I'm out to manifest in my life, financial opportunities, all of it. I've started to discover how to, tap into this energy, infuse it within my body, and then within my environments and communities as well.
Right.
And that is, tantric sex. So everyone is pretty familiar, I believe, with the Kama Sutra. You'd say, Norman, Ryan.
Yeah, a bit.
The office education on it, which probably isn't the office show. So I'm familiar with it in very minimally. Like, I don't obviously know, like, I haven't gone that far with the sexual experience, but definitely just it's more of well, I guess I'm curious, what is it from your perspective? Like, what does it share? What does it do?
A lot of what's really interesting is, like, people hear Tantra and then they're like, oh, sex, right? People hear Kama Sutra and they hear sex and sexual activity and perhaps orgies and like these crazy yogic
hedonism type environments.
And it's like, and for me, totally, right? And for me, it was that's what we've been fed so far, right? The Kama Sutra, actually about 30% of the ancient text has to do with positioning. It was written 300 years after the death of Christ. And at the time, it was written for men to understand how to pleasure women. Because women
not make its way through the bookshelves, did it? The communication chain.
Exactly. We missed some of that.
No, you guys didn't. We did. We just followed the rabbit or something. We're like, just go really fast and really hard, and somehow at the end something magical happens, and we can all celebrate that.
Oh my god!
Or get addicted to it.
Or get addicted to it, right? And so that's 30% of it. The rest of it teaches you a lifestyle. So I believe it's 64. What do they call it? Sex. What's it called? Like, let me look it up right now. Actually, Art of Seduction. There you go. So they designed 64 segments that would consist of the art of seduction. And it would look like knowing chemistry, it would look like understanding what your metals were, it would look like poetry, like you would have 64 things to do with your life.
What do you mean by 64? Like 64
So
what?
64 different items, or not items, but let me look at the right
Are they
wording
like
for this.
are
So
they
so
class?
Jay-Z still has a lot of problems then, eh?
Yeah, another
He
30
has
something.
99, yeah, jeez.
He's got 99. He's got way more than. So there's
The guy
64
brags
arts.
about it as though he's made progress or something.
Oh, Ryan, you're
Good
brutal.
song though. Good song.
I
Good
like
song.
it. I like it. But yeah, so there's 64 arts, right? So they talk about singing, dancing, like there's things like understand, like at the time, like cockfighting, things like that, like magic, gardening, understanding metals.
This is all in the
Composing.
Kama Sutra, like in, or
It's
like,
all part of the Kama Sutra.
really?
Yeah, it is.
So what is
But
this, like a different version, or like without the
no,
non-picture version?
this is the original version.
But is it in
This,
text or is it in picture that it explains this to? Because I
I
thought it
believe
was very picture based, right?
so. The picture based is, the sexual, like they depicted the pictures to have people understand, like to illustrate what it would look like. But the text, there's also text that
Oh,
comes with.
interesting. So Michael Scott just had the wrong version.
Who's Michael Scott?
Oh no, sorry. If you don't watch The Office, so he handed out like a little picture book.
Oh, no. Yeah, so that's what most people have access to, right? Like if you were to go into an Indigo or a bookstore and you look up Kama Sutra, that's what they're going to have is, and so that's what I mean. Like a lot of, when we think about sexual energy, a lot of it is related to physical, and a lot of it is related to in partnership with. And my journey with Tantra, and this is really where my stand is for people, this is the journey with it at the level of self.
Wow, that's really interesting that there is this not very well understood information text, because like I honestly, like I have heard about the Kama Sutra, for example, but honestly I guess I've been brainwashed to believe that all it is just a number of pictures depicting
Yeah,
sexual
that's what I
position.
thought. So it's kind of cool to hear that
And
there's all
like
this.
it's
It reminds me of
really
like we have the book that's more modernized. When I say we as in guys, the Way of the Superior Man, or King, Warrior, Lover, Magician.
so far.
So it's
Farah,
cool
did
to
you say
hear that
that?
there's more resources from Eastern philosophy on this.
There
So
is.
so far, did you say that 38% is like
So about
actual like, sexual
30%
positioning?
is the imagery. It's like talking about sex. The rest of it taps into the
Wow.
lifestyle,
Wow. So
right?
it's not even like, so that 30% is not even representative of the whole book if you're taking percentages, right?
Absolutely.
So then really, so the Kama Sutra then really is, I don't know, like can we title it differently? Like is it like a guide on like relationships and love making
I
then? Because love making is not just penetration and sexual positions, right? Like love making means courting the person. Love making means like
But I think
uh,
so. I think so. If I can jump in, I think it's
Mhm.
important to make this distinction of just how limited, kind of like what Farah said, the our languages when it comes to English, right? Like even when we say, I hear love, it's so interesting because part of me is so confused by that because we treat love as a hierarchy, right? Like I love my family and kids more than anything else. And it's like, well, if it's just an energy, if it's just like you don't say, I love my inhale more than my exhale, although a lot of people live like that, right? And so I think we just look at this word as love, forgetting that in Greece, and I have this book called For Love, there's the love languages. Like, again, it's a spectrum. And I think English just has a really bad problem I've come to realize through philosophy in it. We get stuck in the confines, like Farah said, like we just, and so when I think even of the word sex, I think it's important to even just kind of mention like we are literally trumpets, like we're just beings that have air flowing through us and happen to have resistors that are called organs if you look at it like an electrical circuit. And so when a penis goes in a vagina, it's almost like you're making a connection between like charging your phone. or putting a headset in. Like it's just passing on. Um, in our case, as humans, air, but for technology, it's electricity. And so I know that's a very objective way to look at it, but I think we need to start looking at it that way because we're so stuck in over glorifying this idea of,
So much meaning.
yeah, and I need someone to, and then again, that comes from this limitation we have around the idea of love, which is like, just because I love my nephews, that doesn't mean I have sexual intentions in my head about them. And like,
Yeah.
so I think, and then even when, say, someone does and they happen to be, suffering from that, we try to help boys and avoid that rather than help the person who doesn't understand why they're feeling this energy, which happens to be called sexual energy, and they feel it in their groin when they see a young male. And you're like, that if you think of it very like a plane, you're like, oh, so right now the electrical system is telling this part of the plane to do this, but instead it's doing this. And does it want to do that? If it wants to do that, well, that's illegal in this culture. Yeah, like in terms of pedophilia. But if it's not, it's so funny. The other day I was just kind of researching like how silly the way we focus on things is, like as humans. And so I said, what do I do if I'm a pedophile? Like what am I supposed to do and I don't want to be? Not one article on Google of all places that said, here's how to deal with feelings of sexual energy towards an inappropriate audience. Not one. Everything was like, here's how to protect the victim. Here's what you're going to do if you're a victim to avoid it, And then we get into these arguments like, don't tell me how to dress, like for women. Don't tell me how to dress. Guys shouldn't hate on me. And it's like, no, we're focusing on the wrong thing. We're focusing on what we don't want,
So good, Ryan.
right? What do we want? And so I think just to kind of underline this conversation, what's so important is, and the reason I even bring this up is I know it's not maybe directly related to the content, but I think the problem isn't the content. And I think Farah and I, we'll continue to have conversations, and I'm sure with Norman and Tiro and stuff. But just making sure that everyone realizes the problem isn't the content, it's the context that we live in. And if you look at it in just the way religions are set up, my parents are Catholic. I was brought up Catholic, and it kind of hit me the other day. I'm like, we glorify a guy dead, hanging off a cross with thorns on his head. We literally say to this figure named Jesus, we want to remember you in your suffering state, and we don't want to let that go. We only want to remember you like that because we're born into original sin, and we're never going to be happy till we go to heaven. So we have this context, but and again, that ties in with the idea that doesn't mean the Bible's wrong and the content is wrong. It means the way we're interpreting it, we've gotten so off course in terms of the direction. We keep looking at how things can go wrong, and how things are wrong, that we don't even have, if we take it away from words, we don't even have the context to actually look at the things in a good light, or in a positive light, because we're all fighting over which is the best worst answer.
Yeah.
And you're like, what?
Stand up and give you like a standing ovation, Ryan.
Well, I'm gonna give that energy to Katie Zapiri, who's working on human trafficking and dealing with these stupid conversations on CFRB of people like arguing over the dumb stuff, and like she's kind of holding this space right now to help those people realize, like, ease into this idea of like, guess what? When you have sex, it's just two trumpets. So we can laugh about it like we're at band camp, or we can treat it like it's some sort of religious debacle, even though you're wearing a symbol of a guy who probably is like, please stop treating me like the end of Black Mirror, when you have the guy screaming like crazy in the pendant. And we're like, oh, we're going to put this on our rearview mirror and celebrate the fact that he's fucking dying right now, hanging there. And he's probably like, I want to come down from the cross. And everyone's like, nope, we remember you as hanging on the cross, and you're not allowed to live unless you're in heaven. So again, it's just this stupid reality around how we see things and the context.
What you just said, Ryan, reminded me of a comedian whose name is Bill Hicks. I don't know if you guys heard of him.
Yeah,
Oh, he's awesome. Yeah.
He has a skit. I don't know if I'm gonna just quickly play it just for comic relief. He exactly talks about what you just said, Ryan. Let's see. Let's see if it works. If it doesn't work, then I won't.
You can
play
just
it.
add it on the recording.
I'm curious about it.
Yeah, go for it. Let's hear it.
You guys hear?
Yes.
Yeah.
A lot of Christians wear crosses around their necks. You think when Jesus comes back, he's going to want to see the fucking cross, man?
I think I remember this.
Maybe why he hasn't shown up yet. But man, they're still wearing crosses. I'm not going, Dad.
I'm not going, Dad.
When they start wearing fishes, I might show up again. Let me trade fossil heads with you, Dad. Fuck them. Let's fuck with them. They're fucking with me. Now, let's give me that brontosaurus head, Dad.
Be careful, because everyone's gonna wear a giant rock representing the tombstone he
I'm like
pushed
going up to
away.
Jackie Onassis with a rifle pendant on, you know? Sticking it John, Jackie. We love him.
What did he say? Something about a pen?
He said like John F. Kennedy. It's like if you remember John F. Kennedy because he was assassinated with the rifle.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But I heard the word pen, and I think it's such an interesting example because we're all fighting on like what's the right pen. And when you apply that to the context of, do you remember those blue pens that had the 4 different ink things you could push down?
You click, yeah.
Yeah, the back in the day that when like
Mhm.
back to school, all the kids were like, we need that blue pen because it has the red ink, the black ink, and the blue ink. But you can only use one of the inks at a time. And so it's kind of like, it's like you have all these other options. Jesus has all these amazing pictures. He's been, they had
Mhm.
palms and he was walking down the thing and he had people kissing his feet and doing all this stuff. And it's like, no, 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 no. Like I can just imagine like St. Paul starting this and he's like, guys, we need to pick an important symbol. And I think we should pick the cross because I don't know. Let's just pick the cross to start with. Maybe they'll change it when they realize it.
Yeah. And it's interesting that you bring this up, Ryan, because this is my it's so brilliant what you're saying, because where I stand, even with Tantra, it's infusing pleasure, not removing pain or trying to fix or survive or solve something. It's infusing pleasure. Like, how do you infuse pleasure in your life? Like, from the moment you open your eyes to breathing to walking, like how can life be orgasmic for you?
And I think that's what's so interesting from a guy's perspective of what we don't have education on, proper education. Again, I think of sex ed in school where it's like, here's how the woman's body looks like. And you're like, oh, great. Okay. First of all, you didn't tell me it was a trumpet. You said it was some convoluted item. But the problem but the issue, I think, from a guy's perspective, because I can only speak from a guy's perspective, is we've associated pleasure as black or white. And you could even say 50 Shades of Grey to add a little bit of a pun, but it's always to do with pleasure in an actual sexual orgasmic standpoint. And so I think it's so much of like guys personally, I think why I've hesitated and I couldn't even get into the idea of tantric or, I consider myself more polyamorous. So I don't like labels, but I just don't understand monogamy for the life of me. But I'm also Catholic, brought up Catholic, and my parents are married. So I'm battling all these emotions of like what's right. And then on top of that, I have this other hidden expectation that when I go to approach a woman and she says no, women like to be pursued. The chase is the game, and that's orgasmic. And so then you're going after this thing, and then women are like, no, if I say no, no means no. And you're like, well, my cousin just said that if her husband or her boyfriend at the time didn't kiss her, she wouldn't have liked that. Like he had to make the move. And you're like, what the fuck is going on? Because we're treating orgasm as
what do you want me to do?
What's that?
What is it? No, I'm
oh yeah, no, exactly. What is it?
Yeah, like just give me what the frickin' rule is and I'm gonna follow it.
And the other thing is like if you just said the rule is, hey, it's a spectrum, then this is so much easier because then nobody's fighting. It's kind of like, well, from my end of the spectrum, I don't call it tantric, I call it holistic because I understand health is holistic, and tantric seems something more of a term I haven't studied. Whereas Farah is very well versed in the word tantric and or tantric, whatever it's called, or tantra, so she can speak from that lens. But that doesn't mean we're mutually exclusive in the way we're giving information. It simply means we've translated it based on our understanding and our worldview. And so I think even like to answer that question of like how do you infuse more pleasure, I think we just need to stop. Well, A, go back to that what we talked about is stop focusing fully on the pain side. And then B, stop looking as pleasure as this quick hit, because if we bring into the mix physics, energy can't be created or destroyed. So if you build up all this for a burst of excitement because the Raptors win the championship, well, guess what? That has to be offset by a feeling of boredom or depression, because where's that energy going to go? It's you've created it, you've manifested it, but you're now giving it a direction that says things are only good very few times a week or a day.
And you
Or
almost have to expect when it's good, it's gonna come down.
yes,
Right? Like I
and then
remember
so you end
growing
up
up,
being on
like
vacation, waiting,
you're
struggling
like,
to understand you have to go to work the next day, even though
yeah,
you're on a
totally.
beach or
Right?
the
Or
And
next
so
day.
needing
it
a
becomes
vacation for
like
your vacation.
Right,
second
exactly.
nature. Totally.
Mhm.
And even to add to like the come down thing, where it's like you not only do you anticipate coming down, but you also start to become more uh, hard in your approach to getting it, right? So it's kind of like, if we think of sex, it's like I want to just like the words we use. I want to smash her. I want to pound her, or for I want to be fucked, or like daddy fuck. Like all these words and stuff that we're saying is, again, maybe it's subconscious, maybe it's just part of our culture's evolution, which is likely what it is if we think of it as having no beginning. But if we think of it as having a beginning, is we just got lost in a very bad, or sorry, a very confusing world of communicating. And that's just not word language. That's even, you can think of texting, like how different you perceive. Hey, want to watch Netflix? Dude, if I ask a girl I want to watch Netflix, I probably want to watch Netflix and literally chill. Doesn't mean I'm going to come and try to get in your pants. And so,
Mm.
again, there's all these connotations that what I'm starting when I start to watch like Comic Con interviews, for some reason I've just kind of been pulled into watching cast interviews. I noticed they use a lot of this weird terminology almost from like a different world, where they like use terms like coffee in reference to sex, and you know even when you think of the word cream pie and all these things that we've changed, like we've changed food, which is so amazing, and it's like animals have given up their lives for us to enjoy this, and yet we're going and being jackasses and saying, well, let's have a double entendre to all this stuff, which makes things even more confusing for now more men and women. And so we're sitting here confused, and to make things even worse, we're like, but we must survive. We must
so
not die. It's like, what's going
so
on? Where
so
are we?
what
The
I,
bad place?
from what I hear here, it comes down to like just being conscious about what we're doing, right? Because if you're not conscious of what we're doing, we're just gonna be our
Well,
lives are just
conscious of
being
what you're. Well, but
dictated more by the norm, but what other people are doing.
sorry, it's funny to hear
Um,
you say Norm because your name is Norman.
yes.
But
No, but like we're talking about like you know holistic sex, right? At what point do people say I want to do holistic sex, and at one point do they like I don't care about holistic sex because I'm just like I want to do my thing, the thing that I learn
so
in my
here,
own
so
way.
Norman, I just want to jump in for one second because I think what you're saying is
Yeah,
important, and we're getting there.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
yeah.
the first thing to note on that is, what was I going to say? Uh, sorry, repeat what you just said. That last part.
I think I was kind of talking about just that it
Oh,
comes down
like
to just
yeah, you need to be
being
aware. I
conscious.
think it's a
Yeah.
little. I'm going to add a little. I don't want to say edit, but something to consider is, um, if you don't have the right understanding around awareness, awareness is useless. So if you're in a context
Mm,
where
mm,
everything that can go wrong will go wrong, and you're more
mm,
aware of that,
mm,
it doesn't make you any quote unquote smarter. It just makes you fall more and more for the delusion. So I think awareness needs to come with this idea of like,
mm,
I really believe the best way to say it is looking at Eastern mysticism, or looking at,
mm,
I don't necessarily
mm,
agree with magic because I feel like it doesn't account for what I'm about to say. But Eastern
mm,
mysticism is just a very classy way of saying what we figured out, which is if energy can't be created or destroyed, how do we measure
mm,
energy? Well, we measure energy
mm,
based on frequency. right? So we know that energy is operating as a wave, and frequency of a wave is simply the time it takes to go from, what is it, from a crest to a trough, or a trough to a trough, whatever the heck it is. Obviously, my engineering hasn't stuck with me. And so if that's frequency, and we know everything is energy because it can't be created or destroyed, and that's physics we believe in. That's physics that I'm not even saying that's a story. That's just fact that we've
Measurable.
created. Yeah, it's something that we've collectively agreed to. Then no one can argue the fact that, okay, every energy can't be created. Sorry, that means every frequency exists at some point. And then you can say to yourself, okay, at some point, like, what does that mean? So now we look at past, present, and future. Okay, when I'm thinking about the future, where am I? Well, I'm in the present. When I'm thinking about the past, where I'm in the present. Okay, so there actually is no real timeline except now, except where we are. And so if every frequency that could possibly exist will exist, but there's no such thing as past or future, there's only the now, then it already does exist. And now we move into this idea where it's like, it's not about us trying to create something new. It's us trying to reveal what's already there. It's trying to find the Wakanda and everything.
May I? So there's something that it's so, what I say is like we align ourselves to that frequency. The
Yes.
frequency is already there,
Yes.
right? Like the car you
Radio
want is
station. What
already
radio
there.
station are you on, right?
Exactly. It's like when you start to develop yourself in a way where you're aligning yourself to that frequency, you're living in a whole other dimension of life.
Right. Because then it's just about capacity. How much can I, and then you can think in a little bit more technical terms, depending on how you think. But for me, it's like, how many resistors can I add? Like, how much capacity, how much energy do I have in the battery to go for a walk right now, or to do this call? Or how much do I need to do this call? How much time do I need? If we treat everything more of measurement of energy rather than statements of fact, then what we do is what Farah said at the beginning, is we don't confine ourselves to this box of living where it's like, I have to always be doing something to get there, because doing something now to get there is basically doing something now to get now, like based on that idea that you're always in the now.
So good. It's funny
So
because
I think it's like, just think there's Wakanda bubbles all around you. That's all. That's the easiest way. Black Panther is literally stalking you. So when you're masturbating, Black Panther's watching. But he has a mask on. He doesn't actually care about you doing that shit. Why does he want to watch you?
Well, I want to hear what Farah has to say. But Tierno, have you ever heard Black Panther thrown into this contest before? No, right?
No, that's I'm pretty afraid right now.
it's like, I don't know.
I mean, I love T'Challa, but I don't know what to say. It's
Tierna's like, this went a whole other direction.
yeah, he caught me there. I don't know what Ryan just caught me there. I'm
And Ryan, we can't hear you okay right now, so in case you're wondering. But what I was going to say, this is so brilliant, but this is really where Tantra came in for me. It's like when Ryan's talking about capacity, what is our capacity to align and to keep ourselves within that frequency, right? Because just like a channel, and frequency moves, right? So over time you'll develop yourself and you're like, okay, I'm noticing my life, there's an ease to it. Like it's not as I'm not having as many arguments with my mom. It's not as complicated. I'm not suffering as much financially or whatever it is, right? Like you're starting to you're starting to tune into different frequencies. With Tantra, it's really in the realm of capacity. Right. And this is the first time, through Ryan, through your sharing, I'm like, oh yeah, that's what's happening with Tantra, is you start to develop your energy body to contain that. Because when you start to operate within realms of pleasure, you start to attract pleasure. And this impacts your vitality. It impacts opportunity. It impacts how you align yourself. I stopped. I barely work anymore, to be quite honest with you. I went from working 3 jobs like crazy, trying to figure it out for my family, trying to figure it out for my life, like wanting to get a house, like all of that. Okay. And since working with Tantra and really diving into pleasure and understanding pleasure, things started to come my way. It was less me having to go fix and solve something. And it started to become more around, and obviously through the practices and the studying and so forth, and really discovering, allowing myself to go through the work, is where I discovered, I'm like, wow. And it took me giving up. And so this is the crazy part, giving up my past notion of what life needs to look like. Like, I think it took me about a couple of years to give up, like, okay, like I don't have to work every day.
Test.
I can hear
Oh,
you.
you can hear me? Okay, sorry.
Yeah. And I can actually live my life in a way where it looks like I can travel. I can create. I literally live right now in a world where I can create anything. And I know it and I believe it. And I'm a human being. And sometimes I don't. But I'm more in this space of like, okay, I want to create this. And it's a game. It stops becoming something I'm surviving. I've stopped surviving life. It becomes a game. So now this year I'm playing a different game, bigger, perhaps. Because why not? Why not play a bigger game? Like,
So does that apply? Like, does it also apply? Because we were talking about tantric and sexual. Does it apply sexually as well for you too? Do you just get what you want?
Totally. Because I create it. Because now I've built myself energetically, right? To like look at myself like a computer, right? Like, so the programming. Okay, so, and it's like literally, it's the Matrix, right? Like if we've all watched the movie The Matrix, you tap in, okay, what do I want? I want to learn Kung Fu today, right? You plug yourself in, you download it, right? It's the same. So when you start to work with your computer, your body, your mind, your heart center, when you start to like understand, okay, this is the wiring, this is my biofield, what am I allowing into my biofield, where is my frequency at right now, what do I want to, where's my belief system inside of this project that I'm out to create. Oh, it's at the 6. Okay, so how do I bring my belief system to an 8 or a 9? What's missing? Like, you start to operate with your body in a completely different way. And Tantra, for me, is a science, because it's through understanding pleasure. Because manifesting is like, oh yeah, vision board, writing, da da da. But if you're energetically at like a 4, you're not manifesting anything. It's almost like it backfires. So it's discovering how to get yourself to an 8. It's discovering how to get yourself to a 9. It's like, how do you, and Tantra provides you those practices for you at the individual level. And then you bring it to the bedroom, and then you bring it to your finances, and then you bring it to your business.
So how do you sustain that though in a world that's constantly like how do you get to that belief when you're stuck in one that I think a lot of people are stuck in, where you just can't see how the stuff comes to you because you don't have you're kind of like a Judas of this whole process. You're like, well, I know Jesus, you said you were on a cross, but I see you here. So it's like, yeah, I know, Farah, you're saying all this wonderful stuff, but I'm like, yeah, congratulations, but I'm like trying to figure out how I'm going to keep making money in an economy I no longer resonate with. So it's like, how do you make that switch for yourself? There was no judgment in that. It's more just like,
oh no, I totally get it, and it's a very powerful question, I think. Well, first of all, you're not leaving your job. It's like, everybody,
right.
stay where you are, okay? The number one step is a choice.
Norman gets his lawyers ready.
He's like, oh well,
we didn't plan for this.
We're defunding the system. We still
I took that 1-hour capsule and it told me to leave my job.
I want to also still acknowledge we're still part of this matrix, right? Like, we're still in this system, right? So the first step is you want to choose. You got to get to the point where, like, I'm choosing something else. Like you got to have that conversation with yourself. It's either like for some people, they get to the point where they're fed up. You know, for my spouse, she manifested a tumor, right? Like it's so some people it gets to that point where it's like, okay, what I'm doing with like how like what I'm doing is not working. But you can actually choose for yourself, right? Like, okay, like I'm choosing like I don't want to have to be I don't want it to have to be this way. Tantra for me, there are many ways that you can get involved in many different things, right? Like even just understanding metaphysics, and there's so many different things you can. Taoism is a big resource for me as well. But where you want to start is take a look, take a look at programs that are out there around Tantra. Take a look at how to like really as simply like how do you this was such a simple exercise, shifted so much for me. But before you are about to do something, check in. Where is my pleasure at right now? Like, and put yourself on the scale from 1 to 10, right? And you can define this pleasure in different ways. You can be at spiritual pleasure, you can be at physical pleasure, you could be at cognitive pleasure, right? Like you can start to identify it, like what you want for your computer, right? For what you, and then start to measure that. Where am I at before I get into this meeting? Okay, so what does it look like? What do I need? Like maybe, I don't know, maybe it's a meditation. Maybe it's just like taking 10 deep breaths. Maybe it's the way you're sitting that is not really pleasurable, but we're not even aware. We just go from one thing to the other. Maybe I want a hot cup of tea. Maybe I want to drink a beer. Maybe I want to text that girl that I saw last night that I really liked her instead of being, like conservative or whatever. That'll give me pleasure. Maybe I want to call my mom and tell her that I love her for no
Right.
damn reason, But you start to creatively look to like how I can bring pleasure to my meeting. These meetings are fucking boring. So how about we do a 10-minute dance party before? Like, I don't know. You know what I mean?
It's so interesting because I remember someone once said, he's like, don't invite clients to like a meeting, have like a party or a rave. I think the thing though that I didn't resonate with that is we have to watch that not all the audiences are as extroverted as wanting to do that, right? There's also that like for me, like, and I think that's what's interesting, and because I'm totally on board with pleasure, and the word I use, which is probably also I think a bit misleading, is excitement. I think it's almost like I was talking to someone recently. It's like self-sufficient is probably one of the best words. It's not independent because you want to be interdependent. You want to be able to work with others and see their point of view, but not necessarily need them and
There's
have
a
the
word
ability
for
to
that.
make the choice, right?
Yeah. I don't know if you've ever heard of Landmark, Ryan.
Yeah, I took all 3 courses.
Oh my
Okay,
god.
amazing. Okay, cool. So a word that Norman, I want to know what that oh my god is.
No, because Ryan is the one that like introduced me to the concept of landmark, and I was like,
Have
you're
you done
saying that,
before?
Ryan has, right?
Yeah,
Ryan
I liked it, but my beef was it became too cultish. They tried to move their language to their language. It was a business thing rather than like they wanted you to enroll people in their program rather than focus on your own goals. And so it became
By the
more
way,
of
I said, oh my
which is
god,
kind
because
of sorry, just to that's what I'm talking
Mhm.
about, Far, and I think that's where I've just been influenced from my experiences so much. Is when I hear what you're saying, it's so fantasy to me because my quote unquote experience within my real world, so obviously not like Ryan's world on fucking kid that just has play dates all the time, is I remember when I was there, I was really struggling with money, and so I said I'd help out. And I went up to the lady one day, and I'm like, hey, like, is it okay if for the amount of hours I help out, I can get a discount on the course? She's like, no, we don't do that. You do this because it betters your skill. I'm like, excuse me? So now I'm struggling with money, and now I can't get better personal development stuff. When I had depression, I couldn't even afford a therapist because it's like $150 to $200 an hour. So I think it's so hard for me to believe what you're saying, even though I want to, because it's like there's no universal basic income. COVID is killing everybody with jobs, and so I think I'm struggling to really understand, how do I get to where you are if nothing really, like, I know they say change the way you look at things. So sure, I can be grateful that Norman invited me. I can be grateful I have all this technology. But to be honest, I'm pulled more by the fact that I don't want to work, yet I have to work. And
But
so
here's
it's
the
like,
okay.
Well,
yeah.
I just want to say that the
Oh
reason
yeah.
why I say "oh my god" is because of the synchronicity you two
Oh
have
yeah.
between
Of course.
That's
Well,
only
think about when
why.
we ran into each other, Norman,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
It was just a
yeah,
spectrum of synchronicity. I think
yeah,
Farah and I were just more later on in the
mm.
process type connections.
Yeah. Um.
Yeah.
Like you're literally the man version of me. So, to
Don't
go
tell
back.
Leslie Nopes that. She may not like
So the word that Landmark uses, generating.
it.
How do you generate yourself independent of your circumstances? So no matter what your circumstances, how do you generate yourself? Okay. So that's the one word I want to put in. The second piece that you're saying here, I think is really important. See, the thing, what happens when we're in survival is our creative juices stop. Okay. And it's interesting because, I like, if we were to look at the energetic like centers, this would be part of your sacral, and sacral is all to do with your, your sexual your creativity, and this part of it is sexual, but it's also to do with your safety and your security. So when, like when that's unbalanced, there's like, it's messy, right? What Tantra does, right? And this is to address your question of like, if and I get it, like it's hard to believe, and I can't say that it just was an overnight process, right? Like this took
Right.
5 years of me pulling my hair out. It took 5 years of bawling my eyes and healing myself from past traumas. It took me going to see a shaman in Peru. It took it was it's a lot. I would love for it to sound like, like rainbows and daisies, and I woke up the next day and I was pleasuring myself and my life just completely shifted. It's a journey, right? But one thing that the one big stand that I keep standing for is when you start to find pleasure and infuse it wherever you can, right? Like if it looks like picking up a flower, but starting to have your brain, okay, your computer, look at life through pleasure. Like, how can I activate more pleasure? It automatically starts to, I think I think it binds both hemispheres of the brain as well better. But your brain starts to look at life through like like a spectrum of possibility. So you start to see things. Like you start to see other grids, right, of what's possible. Okay, Landmark's not going to give me a discount for, assisting. Where else can I do this? Because I'm determined that this is what I want. So who else can I have a conversation with? Where else can I go? Like, instead of like being stopped in that conversation with the person that you spoke
Well,
with.
what happens when you exhaust all that? So I'm at a point where it's like the only thing I care about is philosophy, but I don't want to go down the route of academia because they're going to try to tell me what I should and shouldn't believe. Like they're going to try to direct me, and they move really slow. I'm not a fan of things
Yep,
taking
yep,
too long. So like, how do I? Because I kind of did that. I was very much on that page where I was like, oh, play the game to win or switch the game. So if you're not really into it, but I'm at a point now where I'm like, the only game I want to do is like you, not working, maybe consulting, but I did some millennial consulting, millennial generation, but that was a big shit show because all the CEOs were like, well, what do we do? And I'm like, well, we have to talk about why you're seeing that millennials as a negative. They're like, no, no, no. What do we do? And so you have them putting foosball tables and all this stupid shit
Oh
into
my
there.
god.
yeah.
And so,
Content.
and then the
Where's
best was one client had a foosball table, and then there were signs all around it that said, there are people working here. Please do not use the foosball table. And you're like, what? What is going on? And then the coffee nook, you couldn't be loud because everyone was working around. Like it was so stupid. And so I'm sitting here and I'm like, okay, what are my options? I don't want to work. I have an opportunity to work at a cannabis store, which I've accepted tentatively until it opens in mid-November. It's like 2 minutes away from my house. Perfect cannabis. I believe in THC, but it's not my path. It's just something that's part of my path. And I guess for me, where I'm struggling is what you're saying comes from a world of universal basic income. It's where you're guaranteed income to be able to not to get to that point if you've been so beat up by the system. Because it sounds like you've overcome the system, which is amazing. But it's just so fascinating because the people I've been influenced by, I just can't imagine any of them relating to what you're saying, not in a way where they can't relate to you. It's just, it's so far fetched, the idea that you hate meetings, when the fact that I hate meetings, but I got to make money.
Show up.
I have 2 kids or whatever. So, and this is me speaking as like a single guy living at home and with his parents still at the age of 35. So, obviously if it's this bad for me, I can't imagine somebody who lost their job and they have 2 kids. So like, if the belief needs to be reinforced in the physical world by physical patterns, and the only patterns you're seeing are the thing that no matter what I do, because we know that there's going to be obstacles in following your passion. But if money, which is so arbitrarily valued right now, like, it doesn't it's not represented by gold. So we have no commodity. And even when it was gold, why is gold so special? Why did someone decide gold is the way to reference it? Like, we use very, very arbitrary and unrealistic forms of value, that we don't actually value anything except saving time, even though our time is taken up by things um, that we need to do to get more time. So it's almost like we're adding and subtracting time at the same time. Like we're in a zero sum game and expecting things to get better. So when I hear you, I'm like, I want what Farah has, but I still got this job that I got to do that's probably going to kick my ass, that I'm going to have to work like, it's open till 11. It opens at 9 and it closes at 11, which is unlike most retail stores that close at 9. So now if I'm like full time there and he really likes me, the guy said, he really enjoys my vibe. So now I'm going to be working a lot over there for $17 an hour. And so it's like, how do I get out of that? The only thing I can see is survival. I can't see, I actually see more freedom in death, but then that's even funnier because I'm not allowed to go get assisted suicide. So I would
So
rather leave this form, but I can't. And I'm not
what
saying
I
I'm
see.
suicidal. I'm just saying, like, I don't have anything left to do here.
I get it.
So what I see from like the over the top perspective, because you guys are like talking about so many things, and I really love this. But what I see, like, I'm gonna put myself from the outsider perspective. But what I'm hearing here is that there is a force that puts us in this like situation where we have to work to make a living, to sustain ourselves, because like you said, Ryan, there's people who have children and everything. They don't have a choice but to just be in a job that maybe they don't like, and they have to be in these boring meetings and blah 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 and all those things. At the same time, Farah, you're talking about a situation where we can liberate ourselves from that, and then sort of dedicate our lives to execute a holistic living, right? Whether it'll be tantric or it'll be food or whatever what it is, because that is actually, I don't want to say it's the better way, but it is like the most beneficial way for you as a human being, let's say. But
What we
then what
desire.
what I see is like our society, like the reason also probably why we think of Kama Sutra as being only sexual positions and not, you're telling us today that it's actually that's only 30%, is that
Yep.
what I see. And I don't want to get into conspiracy theories so much, when I do actually. But it feels like our society just wants us to make us sheep, and just be whatever, a peg in the machine, and just like suck us out of our energy by making us work from 48 hours a week or whatever it is, overtime until 65, and then die. And then during that time we just give our energy, because our time, our effort, our life is our energy that we actually give away. Which is interesting that, Farah, you talked about the matrix, right? Because in the matrix, that's what it's all about, right? We're like batteries used for machines to feed on.
Yep.
until we die. Whereas, like, I understand, Ryan, your concern about, like, like, yeah, but we have to make a living. So
I,
it seems to me like there's that
But it's
matrix
almost
thing, right?
just to be like add a little bit more of a distinction. It's have to make a
Mhm,
living, but not at the level where I don't have to do anything for it. So like Farah says,
mhm,
she gets stuff coming to her.
mhm,
I don't have somebody saying, "Hey Ryan, like, can we
mhm,
pay you $22,000 to come talk
mhm,
philosophy to us?" So I'm kind of at a thing where I'm like, yeah, I want to study the religions and stuff. I want to be sort of like in Alan Watts' position. But even Alan
mhm,
Watts' position wasn't that great because he spent so many hours lecturing, which it didn't
mhm,
really free up his time. It's just
mhm,
simply gave him an opportunity, and he managed to find that audience, and
mhm,
it seemed to come to him. So I just feel like
mhm,
I'm on the different end of that spectrum where I'm like representing the team, if you want to say it that way, of people that
mhm,
don't have that luxury of stuff coming to them, even though we
mhm,
know manifestations possible. We
mhm,
don't have the capacity. We don't have the capacity to
mhm,
actually listen to Farah's
mhm.
your
But it's because of the matrix, right? It's the war. It's the war that we're living in. Like, in reality, we're in a war. It's the war of, like, the powers that want to control society and everything, and use us as batteries to feed the system,
mhm,
and the people who want to be liberated from that system and actually become, more realized,
mhm.
and detached from those things as much as possible, because we still have to live in this world, right? We still have to live in this capitalist world.
Yeah.
So.
but the thing is, and that's where it's so interesting, right? Is if I'm at a point where it's like we glorify life as we perceive life. If we know everything exists now and it will always exist now, we keep giving ourselves the option that we have to live here. That's just that we have to survive, right? And even if we know this intellectually but can't do it emotionally. But part of me is like, nobody knows what death is like, yet we treat it like some big scary place. But if it's just a frequency and you're just a frequency, who has the right to assume that when you die, you forget everything that you knew? Nobody knows that. Everyone's assuming that. What if dying was actually turning off a game and you die in the game, but you just, it's a different process. And so I'm much further into the thing where I actually think like anyone should have the ability to say, yeah, I want to like just go out peacefully and I'm done, and
Mhm.
treat it like a game. But we make it seem like we're stuck in this capitalist economy. We're stuck in this world. But that's because we treat death as though something we need to be afraid of when we know
Mhm,
nothing about it. And it's like,
mhm,
it's interesting. Even if someone hears that, they'll be like, "Oh man, he's suicidal," and it's like
mhm,
we create this perception around death as though it's like, "Oh no, Jesus died for us." Well, Jesus
So
died for us because he's like, "You guys are idiots. I'm trying to help you, and you're putting thorns on my head and then putting me on a cross, and then when I'm gone, you're still saying, 'Hang on that cross for us.'" And so
yeah.
he's
mhm,
probably like, "Peace, I'm out." I watched Harriet Tubman recently, and at the end it
mhm,
says, "I'll go set the table." And when she died on her tombstone or whatever. I'm like, that's exactly like I'm
mhm.
done. You guys have your fun in the human sphere. I'm ready to
Yeah.
move on and like set the table for like be in Tron with Sam Flynn and like
Mhm,
his dad and like playing epic
mhm,
games. Like, why am I dealing with Earth? And the only reason that I'm going to say yes is because of family. But beyond that, it's like I just think the conversation is so funny because we all know intellectually like a tantric pleasure focused excitement focused mindset is what will allow us to be liberated, but
mhm,
we are continuously living in a system that no
mhm,
matter how much we change from without, we'll always just go back to the same thing. And I read a book recently. It's in a patriarch, which isn't so much a male dominated thing. It's a boy masculine energy dominated society. It's a boyish,
mhm,
immature, right? It's about I need to show you I have
mhm,
12 houses because I'm Jeff Bezos and I own Amazon and I pay my people like shit, but I have 12 houses. I'm gonna put the loudest freaking engine on my car and go downtown so everybody knows I have a really badass car, right? Yet you're waking up all the people in the city, and so
mhm,
it's a very
mhm.
boyish way of looking at it. And I think
Yeah.
um, if we want to evolve, and I say that with girls as well, like feminism, all boys are stupid, and it's like no, like or like you shouldn't rape me. Well, yeah, that's a good hypothetical thing, but are you understanding how sexual energy is being repressed? Are you understanding how sex isn't properly educated in schools beyond the anatomy of a person's body? Like there's a context that we continue to keep wrapping ourselves in that the only way out from my perspective is death, which is why I kind of have given up on life. And I'm not really part of society anymore personally. I don't go out for stuff. I just do my own thing. But it'd be nice to not have to do that. But as far as I can see, until universal basic income becomes a thing in Canada, it's not, because people will always have to fight for that money. And then they'll be chasing the menu and not the value. They'll be chasing the piece of paper and not the actual food that it buys,
Mhm.
or the
So there,
pleasures that it buys.
yeah. So, everything that you're saying, Ryan, is really great, because it is true. We still do, Ryan and Norman, because we still do live in a society where it's structured a certain way, right? And my clock just went 1:11:11. It was like one across the board.
That
Um,
happens. Yeah.
Oh, it's
um,
111 for you? It's 120 for me. Interesting. Okay.
no, it was on the recording screen. It was like
Oh, I see.
Yes.
you
Yes.
know,
Yes.
like
Yes.
Oh,
1:11.
yeah, I see it now. That's funny.
Um,
That's some. Yeah. We're gonna talk about later. Yeah. Go
cool.
ahead.
But so, to really, like, there's so many things that you brought up and that you addressed. And I'm going to touch on a couple of things that you brought up. Yes, like, one, we do live in like a society that's run a certain way. There's so many structures in place that are very limiting to what's possible at the individual level, right? Structurally, absolutely. Now, what I also want to put in is, there's a lot of things that we're learning, right? Like, Ryan, there's a lot of things that you're learning about where life could be, where it is right now, and as long as the circumstances don't change, there's no like, there's limitations to how to get to this, like, let's call it new world, for example. Okay,
In a context that I have to still abide by the idea that
in that
I have
context,
to pay attention to the future, right? Because I tried to go through the thing where I was like, I'm just gonna let things happen and fall into place, and then I end up with a $50,000 debt,
yeah.
right? So it's kind of like it, it it's it's learning to be more in the moment and live more in the moment, but remember that I'm surrounded by parents and family that says, well, what are you
Mhm.
going to do when you retire? And I'm like, I can't get out of that unless I give up family, which I'm not going to do.
So
So yeah, just to give
this
you
is
that more context on that.
yeah. I got it. I got it. The other piece here is, going back, I'm gonna, like, I just remember this one comment you meant about, Earth. I do believe that Earth, the planet Earth, is a school. I think there's many planets that we.
Oh, why couldn't you be in my youth group? I once told them that. I said it's like a school/game and you level
I
up, and they all
I
laughed at
I
me.
told you that. I also told you
Ugh.
that, Ryan. Remember?
Why couldn't you be
I
in my
just
youth group? Why are you guys not Catholic? It would have been so much
So,
easier.
it is. That's the way that, and I've done a lot of studying with hypnotherapists, psychics, and there's so many different, there's commonalities within their speakings. But I do believe Earth is a school. It is a place. It's the only planet that we come to where we don't remember.
Right.
So we come in, we don't remember, and we're
Well,
here. We're
all
there.
we do remember or have been told is that we came from the inside of someone else.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Some individuals, some souls with certain energetic bodies do remember, right? Or like, they're clairvoyant or psychic, right, and so forth, right? And so they can explain further. But choosing to, the one thing that I know is, well, not that I know, it's not the truth, but something that I believe is that taking your life on this planet prevents from the points. It's like a game, like you pass, you win one level of the game and you level up, and then you win the next level. So the point of coming to this earth, is what I believe, is to go through this schooling and to get as many, like, that's the game I play. It's like, how many levels can I get through in this lifetime,
But the
right?
thing is like how, like if I get bored of a game, I don't keep
Hmm.
playing it and try to say I'm going to level up. I change the game. So I have a Google Stadia, which
Yeah.
is like just my game system. And so if I get bored of playing Division 2, which is like a more like highly active shooting game, and then I'm like, oh, I want to play more of a sniper type game, I go to Ghost Recon. And
Hmm.
then like if I want more of a multiplayer, I want to play Call of Duty, but I can't. Sorry guys, because they don't have Call of Duty. But what I'm trying to do, what
You
I'm
have
trying
games. You have access to those
no,
games.
I have access to those games, but the thing is what if I'm like, I just don't the Earth game, we've come here and I've learned my lesson. We know physical. I know physical and I've experienced the physical and material. But to assume that me taking my life will end up removing me altogether from the physical is a big assumption. Like nobody's given me proof that that happens. How do I know that I don't actually? It's not a cheat code, and I actually end up with in the physical with all the money. Like when I used to cheat in Roller Coaster Tycoon, I found this code, I put it in, and I had unlimited funds. So I would build roller coasters. I would literally just toss my guests off because it didn't matter what they thought of my park because I had unlimited money. So I would just fuck with them and I would throw, they would all die and I would try to see like how far I could launch them. And so I have all these guests dying. And in their minds, what if they were like, oh, this guy created this amazing thing where he has unlimited funds and we can just die, but we really don't die because it was all part of virtual reality. Because again, virtual reality, augmented reality, it all exists. So part of me is like, we're treating death as though it's Earth as a necessary quote unquote evil to get further in the game, forgetting that Earth is just one game. And so it's kind of like I'm at a point where I'm like, if I can't access what I want and I don't want to do anything more, I should have the right to be like, I'm done with this game. And I should have the right to be like, go to the hospital or the hospital. I want to create like actually a really cool place. People can be like, hey, you know what? I want to check out. Not even die. I just want to check out of the game. Great. So do you want to go in a coma? Do you want to lose your consciousness altogether? What do you want? I want to go into a coma for 24 hours. Good. I just want to see what it's like. Yeah, sure. So we do that. And then they come out of it. You're like, you know what? I don't remember what happened, but it felt right. Great. We're gonna put you through the process called congratulations, you've graduated from Earth. Who are us to say that we have the levels already like predefined in our conscious way of communicating, right? It may already be there, and it probably is. So if someone says, "I'm gonna go," and I'm gonna give you this piece of paper that says I consented to go, and I'm going with this intention that I'm going to keep on to this name and this character, but I'm simply going to move into a different game that isn't Earth. What's wrong with death? Like that's what I think would be hard to convince me out of because it's what you just said is assuming that we have to go through the levels of Earth in order to be quote unquote successful. But that's assuming a linear process that we just talked about doesn't exist because everything is here and now. And so that's why when I love Alan Watts, he says someone once came to him and says, oh, I want to commit suicide. He's like, go ahead, kill yourself. And the person, as soon as they were given that choice, didn't really want to. But I'm taking it further and saying we should not be trapped here, especially when we know that you can put a VR headset on and get lost and immersed in a world that isn't yours. So if you can do that on physical Earth, to assume that you forget everything, where do you go when you forget everything? Because you can't forget everything, because when you forget everything, you're still remembering the words forget everything, which is a frequency field of its own. The words themselves, forget everything. So when you go out, and if all you remember is, oh, I forgot everything, you're still in the world of communication based on alphanumeric communication. So you actually can't exit, you can't go back to a singularity form once you're in a dualistic form. Because to go into a singularity form would be to go into a place before the Big Bang is simply to be Oscar the Grouch going into his garbage can. We don't know what happens, or Doctor Who going into his phone booth and it's actually a spaceship. And so I use these crazy analogies because I just want to make it clear. Like it's like if Earth is a game and we've created the idea that suicide is bad, what we've actually done is created a religion around the game that says our game is better than every other game and you must go through our process, which is very, very immature patriarch and is both to blame on women and female, male and female, because they're both perpetuating this game. And so if we can actually destroy gender differences and equality and all that nonsense by saying the fact that you're making someone live here on Earth and not giving them the right, it's illegal to kill you, to die.
Ryan. I was trying to talk this whole time and I realized that I was on mute.
I was wondering, I'm like, why did she give me so much talk time? I didn't understand.
I'm like,
I was like, I'm going to keep using it. Ranking up the time points.
That's so funny.
Oh yeah, time is my new currency, right? Like in wasting time, because then the more I waste time, the more energy I save potentially, right? For later on.
So here, two things, okay? 3 things. 1, look up, have you looked up human design?
No, but it sounds interesting. Let me do that
Okay,
now.
great. Do you know your time of birth?
Human design. Yep. 7:30. 7:30. 7:30, potentially 7:35 p.m. on a
Okay,
Thursday.
cool. I think it'd be very interesting for you to understand your human design. 2, gene keys is another map that you're probably going to
What
really
is it
love.
called? Dream what?
Gene keys. Gene like DNA gene.
Yeah, cues.
Mm-hmm.
Keys. Like a
Keys.
key to the
Keys.
door. Key.
I'm putting
Gene
in the chat.
like a key for the door or the
Oh,
car.
key. I thought you said tea. I'm like, again, another food reference. What the hell?
No. Okay, so
Uh,
those 2 things. Third
how
thing,
about
I guess
like 23 and Me and stuff? Does that help at all or no? That's just
I don't know
more.
what that is.
Oh, that creates more of like where you came from. So actually, it probably perpetuates a false past. Never mind.
Yeah,
Oh, that's
you don't need to know any of
yeah.
that stuff.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
So what I want to say is, yes, this whole dying thing, I get it for sure. I think the important thing though to look at is, instead of like, okay, I'm done here, is why the heck did I choose to come here? I think that's the most important question. Is like, why am I here? What is my life for? Like, why did I choose to come here? Because I think before, yes, it's not, it's like, if in a game, in a VR, absolutely we can choose to go from one game to the other. But the thing is to notice the steps before, because before we choose to go to another game, we had to work for that game, right? Like, we had to, I don't know, like, get a job, find the money. Our grandparents gave us money for Christmas, so we were able to get another game. And just like that, what I'm sharing with Tantra is, you start to develop a new way of getting to a new game. It's not tomorrow you wake up and you're in a new game. You can build yourself to that point in this game, like on the earth. You can. You can start to, the more you start to build your energy body, understand consciousness, manipulate what it is that your reality is, because that's what it comes down to. You almost become a sorcerer of life. Okay. And when you start, but it takes something to get there. It's not like, it takes the building. It takes, like, you have a lot of the cognitive understanding and quite a bit of experience, but there's even more. This is what I believe, to gain through this experience. And the way of doing that is through the experiments, is through finding, and for me, community is a big piece. Is like having other people that are also committed to, like, okay, like, how do we create another game? How do we start? Like, if that's the game I want to play, what does that look like? Okay, so I have this job at this cannabis place right now. It's going to feed me right now. Okay. What do I want to create in 2 years? What I want to create, or 1 year, whatever, right? Like, I want to create this, right? If I'm not
But what if that doesn't exist on the human plane? So I want to go join Sam Flynn in Tron. So I want to go into a reality where it's light based. It's a cyber, call it a cyberpunk, cyberspace, cyber art, whatever. So I'm done. Like the physical, I know I don't need the physical anymore. I know physical is simply a condensed view of light, and I'm like, great. But what you're still saying to me is that I should be excited for what's to come, which is creating a future.
I never said should.
Okay. Sorry, by the way, I'm like excited, but it's not at you, it's at the content. So
I got it. So I just want to, because the wording is very, very important.
Yeah, so
right? It's going to limit what's possible in this conversation. I never said should.
Right. So my apologies, yeah.
Yeah, no worries. This is a possibility. This is, again, this is part of my truth, right? And it's a new perhaps spectrum to look through. And the one piece, and the other thing is, like, light work is totally possible as well in the physical. And this is, again, through my experience. Like, when we go to sleep, it's not like our soul is not sleeping, everybody. Okay. This is another thing. Before I go to sleep, I program myself. Okay, I'm like, this is what I want to cause tomorrow. This is what I want to create. This is what I want to finish. Okay, show me how. I go to sleep with that intention. If I go to sleep and I'm like, have a little something in my throat, I let my, I like speak with my celestial team. I speak to my soul. I'm like, okay, I allow and I permit all work that needs to be worked on my body in the next 5 hours to happen. But you start to, and another thing that people, I don't feel do enough of is ask. Like, ask, not just your physical team, but like your celestial team. Like, take the time to acknowledge, people call them guardian angels, they call them light being, they call them, beings of the galaxy. You can speak to Buddha, Jesus, Allah, whatever it is, that you're aligned with, right? Or whatever it is that you believe in, and ask them. Because the trap is, you guys, we try to fucking solve it ourselves.
Hmm.
And it is so limited. Tap into the consciousness of Albert Einstein. Tap into the consciousness of Alan Watts. You don't need to physically leave anything to have a conversation with Alan.
But
You
that's the
don't.
thing. So, but Alan is basically saying to me, "Why are you wasting your time in human form?" And I'm like, "Because it's illegal to leave."
Mm-hmm.
So,
That could be, again, that's a context through which you can look at that conversation.
right, agreed. But like, so I guess what I'm saying though is there any information that we can learn from Tantra that can
Mhm.
help me? Because that's the reality we're facing, right? Like
Mhm.
Norman right now can't see his girlfriend in another country because of COVID. But even when she comes, she has to find a job. Otherwise, it's even though he could, cover things maybe from a lifestyle standpoint, what is she going to do? Just sit at home all day like a little dog? There has to be, she has to get a job. There's no choice in that. And so we're stuck in this reality where we don't have a choice when it comes to money. And the worst part is there's a solution that our government, which we've trusted, that obviously is like picking chocolate and vanilla at Baskin Robbins, even though you have like how many flavors do they have now? 75, 76? And you're stuck with choosing chocolate or vanilla, conservative or Republican, or in the States, that's what it is. So it's almost like we know that there's the possibility to get universal basic income. We know that money is a big delusional monopoly
Not gonna.
system.
I again, this is my point of view. I don't think it's gonna happen.
So what do we do as someone that if it's not going to happen, what do we do? Like,
It's
what is Tantra? What is like your experience from holistic living? Like, how do we get to a point where you are if
build
suicide is the best option?
build your energetic body.
Mm,
Reinforce. What I believe is what we learn here is also what we take away.
right.
Right? And there are other games that we play, right? But build your biofield, like
Okay, that's an interesting
understand.
word. Can we capture that, guys?
Yeah, your
Yeah.
biofield. So you want to build, like, you want to understand what this biofield is. You want to understand the science behind it. You want to take on
Do you have any
practices.
recommendations on the biofield using that language? Because I like that language. Do you have a
Mhm.
book or something that we can
Okay,
look?
so I don't know. Okay, there is a really cool book. It's called.
By the way, what is difference between gene keys
Okay,
and that
so
other one you said?
I'll go through
Human
that first.
design?
So human
Yeah.
design is so these are both maps. Okay, human design accumulates, puts together the chakra system, which they have upgraded. So Ra Uru, who downloaded the human design, he basically he went from the seven system chakra system to from seven energy centers to nine energy centers. So it's this new evolved chakra system that they have in there. Then it's astrology, the I Ching, and the Kabbalah tree of life all in one map. Okay. It explains what your design is. So there's four different kinds of auras on the planet. 70% are generators, they're open. 20% are projectors, which may be you. And then which are 20, so it's 20%. Their aura is close to their body. They have sort of an opening at the center, and they're meant to guide people, but they cannot guide until somebody asks them to guide. 8% are manifestors, very tight auric field around their body. They're here to inform people. They're 8%, they're sort of like, they'd be considered like volunteers on the planet to bring people into a new reality. And then 1 point something percent is reflectors. These are really interesting. They're able to jump in and out of the matrix. They reflect, the community that they're in. Like if I were to take my friend Kira, who's a reflector, out from the city of Toronto and put her into Costa Rica, she would completely change like who she is. Like she'd just be like a total Costa Rican. And she reflects, like she's able to jump in and out of the matrix. She's not tied down to a single a structure essentially.
Right.
So this, and then there's, I can read your chart for you. So I can give you my number after this call and we can set up a call. And then Gene Keys, you would have to have somebody read it for you. But Gene Keys
By the way,
looks
is that your business? Like, is that what you do?
it's not.
Oh, it's not. Okay, so you would do that more just as a friend, not as a client.
Yes,
Okay.
totally, yeah. And then so Gene Keys is it's a map that involves, I want to say it's the I Ching and astrology. And basically what it identifies for you is your purpose. It has these different, like it's a little more complicated for me to understand, but if you're into that stuff, I think you may actually just purchase the book, look at your map online, and then you can go through your system. I think it's pretty like straightforward that way. But it completely shifted how I, like for example, I'm somebody, like my spouse is somebody who needs to look at life through her, like herself, like how it benefits her. It's like, so if she's doing a business transaction, immediately she's looking at how it's going to benefit her. When I'm doing a business transaction, I'm looking at the impact that it's going to make with other people. It just is. It's like an automatic thing. I can't help it. But I've been taught that I need to value myself and, look at what I'm going to get out of the transaction before it's something that would work. But not everyone's designed that way. Right. So when I hear coaches that, like, oh, you have to believe in yourself, you need to do this, you need to do that. That's not necessarily the design for every soul and every blueprint on the planet. There's different forms. And so when you nail your blueprint, when you're like clear on what your blueprint is, it allows for you to optimize how you function. Like there's people that in my life where I'm like, yeah, stop working at a retail store. You're not meant to be. You're going to be tired. Your physical body is going to be exhausted. You're going to have these health problems. You have to be leading people. So look to see where in your life you can create something and work at the store, perhaps 50% if you can, and like start to transition into more of a manifestor role and don't be a generator. A lot of projectors think that they need to be generators. So like, they're working like crazy. Right? Like, they're not meant to work like crazy. They're supposed to, like, they're the hermit in the freaking mountain, okay, that people are supposed to go find. They're not meant to publicize themselves or whatever. And so when you start to, again, understand your design and you live your life by your design versus what they teach you at school, what the government's teaching you, what your friends and family have been trying to infuse in you, but it's not part of your design, it doesn't work. Right? It becomes toxic. It starts to become challenging. We can't freaking like it's limited and restrictive. So those are two things that I absolutely recommend people start to identify. What is your system? What is your blueprint? I don't know if you're wanting to talk, Ryan, but you're for you.
I do want to say something. So first of all, I want to acknowledge that we've gone
I
through an hour
know.
and a half. I just want to
Norman.
I want to respect everybody's time because I think I mentioned before that we go between 1 hour to an hour and a half. So I don't know if people need to leave
No,
or
yeah,
something.
you gotta. I feel like it's consistency is important for you, Norman, on the time. So that's good.
Change it to the 2 hour capsule.
Not necessarily. No,
Well, you can't change mid though, right? So we did go over by what 12:30 to 1:30. It was supposed.
I want to acknowledge, but
Oh,
I
oh my
also
gosh,
have
we started.
I also want to kind of go back a little bit and like thank you first of all, Farah, for like incredible amount of wealth of knowledge that you're throwing at us. From the last podcast that I had with you, like there were a lot of things you said that I researched and then that like just complemented my knowledge, and I was like, wow, that was really really cool. The stuff you said, and as you heard me said at the beginning of the podcast, I'm in this like process right now where I really want to see where tantra or holistic sex can be something that I can look into. But I want to say two things. And number one is you started talking about how um, this idea of tantric sex and like the Kama Sutra and whatnot. Like I think we have a, you know, I definitely did not have a good understanding of it that I now have after this podcast. That I think from what you said is that it's not really like tantric sex or even Kama Sutra. It's not really about like, you know, the act of, you know, sex
Part
itself,
of it, yes.
but there's a whole big part of it that is not exactly that. That for you to even get to that point, you need to go through like, you know, so many things before that. And I think that is one thing that I definitely like I learned. You
Hmm.
know, even when you talk about the Kama Sutra, you said it's like 30% is only like sex, but then it's like you said about pleasure, and like we need to infuse pleasure into other aspects of our lives even before we get there. So I just want to like, you know, say that I captured that in this podcast, and I'm very thankful because it
Mm.
really like has clarified that in my head. But the other thing I want to mention is, as a question to the two of you, kind of, is that if you two have already practiced holistic sex slash tantric sex, what is your experience have been bringing in a partner to do that with you? Because in a funny way, and I don't know why I have even considered this, that I consider that perhaps I could, you know, do this on my side of things without having to involve the partner. But actually, what I'm seeing now is that if that's gonna work, like if I'm gonna test that out, I need to get my partner in it 100% and do probably as much work as I plan to do before I even consider on doing it, because it's
Mm.
not gonna just work if I do it, right?
It
So
will work if you do it.
okay.
And when you say, it also, it depends on what you're looking to create here.
Hmm.
But when you say it will work,
Hmm.
um,
Like
you know, what do you mean by that?
by that I mean, will it have any? Would there be any positive
Totally. Oh man.
result?
Yeah. 100%.
Mm-hmm.
100%. Yeah.
That's, that's good to know.
Yeah. Yeah. Because
See, like the only time I got there was on shrooms, and it
Mhm.
was great. We lasted like I went on for like 6 hours from a sexual standpoint, but it's one of those things where I feel like you have to have a really great partner that understands and that has an intention beyond the physical,
Mhm.
and learning to. At that time, it was more enjoying it, but whereas now I'm more interested in how do you transmute that energy while enjoying it.
Mhm.
So how do you do instead of one or the other? How do you do both? Which kind of I feel was done then, but I'm talking about like how do you become aware and discover more frequencies during
Mhm.
that experience, and all you're doing is extending the timeline and the and lowering the frequency between pleasure and pain. So it's happening so rapidly, you actually don't realize it's happening at all. You're just going with the flow.
Mhm.
But again, the biggest limitation that I feel people who relate to my side of the equation are that you're going to face is listen to Farah with the idea that um, there is an element of survival, and
Mm.
that you have to be careful that you don't treat hope as something that will come in the future, but rather, as Farah said, something that is here now, you simply need to tune into. And
Mhm.
so there's no right answer to that because that assumes that there's a beginning. But the
Mhm.
beginning, based on our story, is this idea of God that knew everything all at once. That's all it knew. That's a singularity only knows everything happening all at once. So the only way it can experience duality is to lose some of its memories and leave it behind, whatever that means to it. And
Mhm.
then we came about as humans and cultures and multidimensional beings, and now we're simply trying to. We have the technology and the right thoughts to get back to where we're all together, but we're on Earth. We're creating a lot of rules that really are just red tape because there again, and that just goes back to the idea that if you understand what I'm saying, what you also need to do in terms of starting to be more aware of your energetic field, like Farah is saying,
Mhm.
is realize that UBI Works, which is an organization by my buddy Floyd, is fighting for universal basic income. Bernie Sanders just joined Joe Biden's campaign race. Like we have
Mm.
people that think along the lines of socialism, but without the idea of it being like Cuba, where the government gives you everything. No, you can be capitalist all you want. All I'm saying is people should live in dignity, no matter who they are, if they come to
Mhm.
this country. It's unacceptable when you have a winter that people are homeless. And the
Mhm.
worst part is a UBI, universal basic income, at $2,000 a month still isn't enough for this damn city.
Not in Toronto.
Not in Toronto, and even in the suburbs, like you'd be lucky to survive that, and definitely not if you have a family. And so it's
Mhm.
just like, personally, the way this all ends is Bitcoin,
Mhm.
or I would say Bitcoin, not even a variant. Bitcoin is the
Mhm.
easiest thing. It has a good brand. It has a good logo. It's well known. It has the guy who created it that has no real interference. He left it up to technology, or he made an agreement with technology. And so, if you're listening to me and you're like, "This is great," what Farah is saying, how do I get there? For me, it's fight for UBI, fight for universal basic income, and fight to get rid of fiat currency and move into Bitcoin. Because I know a buddy of mine who's doing really good, and he left the world in a way. Like he's totally globetrotting and stuff, and he's like, I just rely on my social Bitcoin, my
Mhm.
currency, not social, my
So
cryptocurrency.
that's he found a way to unplug from the matrix by doing that.
You do that and stop fighting like who's right, boys are this, girls are that. That's like, this is like, it's like politics. It's like a big temper tantrum of my godson and my 1 year old nephew, where he threw a toy phone at him. That's like Nancy Pelosi ripping the speech because she didn't like what Trump said. Don't distract yourself with that nonsense. The government's a ploy to see how bad you really want it, just like in that Black Mirror episode, Hang the DJ, where it's like they went and you had to find a way to get out of the game. But the way to do that was to exit completely through suicide, which
Mhm.
they didn't kind of do in a way they did, but they did it together. Or
Mhm.
you change the system, but you got to focus on the right things. Stop fighting stupid political rallies or
Mhm.
stop fighting for stupid political issues because they don't matter in the end. Because even if the government is defunded the police, well, guess what? You still have crime. And why do you have crime? Because people can't afford a dignity way to live. They can't
Mhm.
afford a tent to live homelessly. So you know that the end of the goal there is money. You need to figure out money. And we know that
Mhm.
fiat currency is fake. It's not grounded in anything. There's no coding behind it. It's
Oh yeah.
completely arbitrary. And
Oh
so
yeah.
again, anyone who's on my perspective who can understand what I'm saying, the struggles I'm facing, um, I want like keep an open mind to Farah, like completely open as much as you can. And when you feel those blocks and you feel really angry and you don't feel like shooting people in video games anymore, fight for something that aligns with not education. I'm doing education, and trust me, there's nowhere left to go with education. Everything's there. We need now the right resources to experience and apply what we've learned, not to keep running around reading books. Right? Like when we
Mhm.
have time, when we have the money, that's fine. Go on a beach, we'll all read together. We'll go in a campfire pit and we'll all pull out our books and say, "Hey everybody, what do you want to do?" I don't know, read. Someone else says I want to play the guitar and someone else like I don't like this, I'm going to go inside. Who the fuck cares? But we can't do that. We can't even buy the house. We can't even put a lease or get a mortgage on the house because none of us can afford to live in this damn city. So
Damn it.
we need to fight for that cryptocurrency tooth and nail. Wealth Simple just opened up cryptocurrency wallets, which so that means everyone has access, Canadian and American. Before
Mhm.
just UK really had access to crypto. I remember I was
Mhm.
a client wanted to pay me, I couldn't even find a wallet. So now we have that through Wealth Simple. We need people focused, um, you know, male, female, female, male, non-binary, super binary. I don't give a shit who you are. If
Mhm.
you feel move to do something, hack the system when it comes to currencies. Find ways to get more and more people on the
Mhm.
blockchain, on Bitcoin,
Mhm.
and get people to stop. And another half of people, or the other group of people, um, uh, start to fight for universal basic income. We need to bring fiat. Is it fiat currency is a transition currency? It's going to take us from the physical world to the digital world. So we can't get rid of it. We have the credit cards, we have cash, but to get to a cashless society, we need everyone on digital. So internet's another thing that you can work on. And if it's
Mhm.
not one of those three things, then this my perspective can't help you. That's all. It's really that
Thanks for
simple, but
listening.
it's kind of like, okay, then change the channel. Like, don't listen to the podcast. And that's what life should be about. But we're stuck by the money because we got so caught up in chasing the measurement of frequency. Now it's like a construction worker showing up to work and saying, I can't do my job today because I don't have enough inches. What the fuck do you mean you don't have enough inches? I don't have enough millimeters. I don't have enough um, pressure units. Well, just pull out the thing and measure. No, 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 no. I can't. No, what you're missing is you don't have the the what's it called? The tape, measuring tape.
Mhm.
Okay, so go buy measuring tape. I don't have any money. Always comes back to money, right? So if it always comes back to money, then what we need to do is get everyone in a way where money's not an issue, but more importantly, remove ourselves from money altogether. Because when you remove yourself from the monetary economy and you focus on the energetic economy, just like we can measure weather maps and we know where it's more like thermal maps and all this stuff, we can measure where rich people are because they're obviously going to have more excitement based on lifestyle. So you can have a map where all rich people are, and then you'll have a map where all the poor people are, but it will be colors. So you won't know who's who. You'll simply have people say, I'm going to go over here. And if, say, you can figure out the color of where people don't have access to information, then you can run workshops in that color area rather than segmenting people. Oh, black people live here on Parliament Street, so we're going to go work with the underprivileged because they're black. Well, obviously, then there's going to be racism because we're treating everything as though black and white people, or yellow if you include Chinese. And then we have three colors, and then blue, purple, pink, magenta. All the color mixes are sitting there, and they're like, "What's going on? Why aren't they adding us to a map that we can just help them? Why do they keep treating things as hot or cold when it could be warm, lukewarm? So many options." So anyways, that was a bit of a tangent that may not all make sense to you guys on the call, but there's going to be people that are listening to me that understand like the direction to take with that I've been missing, which is stop treating things as though there's a right answer, because there isn't. Because in the past I would have fought with Farah and saying you're wrong, right? Which is why we're very similar, because she knows that. I'm sure in her past lifetime or something she did the same. And what we've both realized is you need to still be passionate as though there is a right or wrong, simply because we're in that environment. But also, like, that's why I'm pushing a certain direction. But at the same time, I don't care if somebody doesn't take that direction, because that doesn't affect our relationship. We can still get along together, but it just enhances our relationship and speeds up the process when we have more people. So that's why we still got to pay attention to the audience and not get lost in our own conversation, right?
I'm laughing because I think like we really need to like have more of this podcast, and I'm thinking
love
just gonna have a,
No, it's
a whole
great.
series of this.
I was telling,
Because
by the way, Far, I don't know if you read, I was saying what we
yeah.
should do is all of us have our own screens shared next time. So,
Yeah.
like, say when you say stuff, I'm Googling stuff, there'll be certain people in the audience that'll be like, oh, I like where Ryan's thinking, even though they're listening to you. So their visual is my cue. So I may go to certain images that I'm thinking of that may make sense of what you're saying based on my screen. Because if you think of like Zoom calls right now, they show people's faces. Who cares?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Right? So I don't know. I asked Norman, he's a good hacker. He's a good innovator to basically find a platform. Yeah.
I'm gonna go evaluate the platforms
And
to be able
then
to do that.
Tierno can be our verifier of that's our idea. So if anyone steals it, they owe us money. They owe us points.
Oh my, so good. So good.
So just wanted to see about kind of coming to a close. So if people have Farah or Tierno, Ryan, want to say any last thoughts about the podcast? Or
I think first of all, I love it, and I apologize if I took up a lot of the conversation talking. I feel like that's I think my struggle right now with these is that I don't think a lot of what I want to say I can just browse through really quickly. So I think it'll be a very different environment once we have the each of us sharing screens, because sometimes when Farah's talking, or even you, Tierno didn't talk much on this one, but I'm not paying attention because I'm in a visual field of learning. So I'm focused on my TV and I have other things going on here. So I feel like I'm not always listening to Farah, but I'm understanding it, but not as much as I could if I could go through my own visuals and know that I was helping somebody else also understand it better. So if I could be a teacher, but also a student, and simply have someone eavesdrop like people do it on Twitch, right? To see video games being played.
Mm-hmm.
So I think if we
Interesting.
can get that, I think it'll change your podcast. And I honestly think I've never seen that before. You always see one person sharing a screen. So if you get 4 people sharing a screen, I actually think this will take off. And you'll have a YouTube channel in there as well, so you can put up
That's
both.
true.
Yeah. So if you can find
True,
that
yeah.
platform, A, don't tell anybody but us, and B, yeah, let's just try to get it white label. Like, try not to get it branded by the company. Like,
True.
use it as the 1 hour capsule brand. See if you can get that logo on
Sure.
it. Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
And then it's game over. It already is game over. But what I'm saying is,
Yeah.
like, if we don't bring something back with us in terms of what is going to make it better, we've wasted our time, and none of us want that, right? So,
Right.
yeah.
So we will have another, for sure. We'll have you both back again. Farah,
With
do you have
screen
any?
share, so stay tuned.
Screen share.
Okay. Okay.
I can't come back if it's not screen share. I'm realizing.
All right.
The protocol won't let me. So.
All right. Farah, do you have any last
No,
thoughts?
thank you so much for having me. This was so cool, Ryan. It was really great getting to know you and having our conversation. This was, it was really, I find this so fun. So
Likewise.
fun.
And by the way, you said your spouse, what does she do again?
So I'm into sexual energy. She's into the energy of money.
Okay. And are you monogamous or are you polyamorous or
We're monogamous.
monogamous? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting approach, yeah.
And sorry, what was hers? Yours is sexual energy and hers is what?
The energy of money.
Oh,
Wow.
funny. So maybe we'll bring her on. So
Yeah.
so what we may need to do, if you can't, 5 may be a weird screen share, is Thierno, you won't share your screen. It'll just be us 4, and you'll verify.
She's
But do you think Farah?
person to have.
I'm
Farah, do you
excited
think
because I think that
Farah,
sex, money, and my
yeah,
Alan Watts philosophy stuff, and Norman's sort of curiosity with Thierno.
yeah,
Even if you guys communicate on text and try to strategize like
yeah.
how to direct where we go browsing, it'll be
So
interesting.
Farah, do you think your spouse would join us?
Oh,
Maybe we can talk about,
I'm sure she would be happy
because
to.
Ryan was talking about Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. Do you think that will be a topic that we can unpack?
Well, that's what we do. So it's
Oh
perfect.
my goodness, I'm so excited already.
Yeah.
And by the way, there's a great podcast that I think you'd be a great guest for. I don't know them, Farah, but it's called Water and Whiskey, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So just if you go on YouTube and type that,
Up.
look them up, and then just say, I think I'll see if I can message them as well. But they're part of
Yeah.
sort of the crew that I work with.
And
Very
Farah,
cool.
do you have any knowledge of any events? Because last time you told us there was an event in Nathan Phillips about human trafficking. Is there anything like that?
I don't know anything right now around human trafficking. No, but there is something that I've just launched. I've just launched a 21-day Tibetan Tantra meditation practice for women. Sorry for the men out there, but I'm not there just yet. But for women, it is completely free. The website, I don't know if I'll send you the information, but
Yes.
where you can get access.
Can you say it out? Can you say it on the voice? What the website? Or is it a
www.hersacredpleasure.online, and our Instagram is @hersacredpleasure.
Perfect. And have you thought of talking to like what's that one? Those Luna balls and stuff? Like I know there's a big ad now on the Gardener for technology along like self pleasure and sort of just the physical side of exploring yourself. But I think you'd have a great sponsorship opportunity there.
Very cool.
Right.
I haven't been to Toronto in like 7-8 months.
Yeah, search Luna Beads is one of them, and then Lilo, and I think Lilo is the one I saw.
Okay.
And then there's also
I see. Yeah. I think Farah. I
do need to hop off.
Cool. Yeah.
So I just want to like, do you know any last things very quickly that you may have? And then,
No, I need to listen to this like 3-4 times.
All right.
That's basically it. It's hard to talk when you
don't
really
try to
have an
understand it
opinion.
though. Remember, don't try to understand it. Listen to it and browse the internet and see where you go on the internet, and it'll help you understand it. Yeah. Don't listen to it. If you try to understand what we're saying, you're trying to understand 2 sides of the spectrum at the same time, which you can't. What you can do is listen and then see what comes to mind and have it reflected back to you on your screen. That's the easiest
Okay.
one. Yeah.
Okay.
Very cool.
Okay. Well, with that, I'm gonna close it right here and just stop the recording. And thank you again, Ryan and Farah.
Likewise.
And
Thank
look
you, and so
forward to
nice to
have
meet you,
you on the
Farah, as well.
next episode.
Likewise.
All
Woohoo.
right. Bye. Bye all.
Bye.
Okay, bye,
Yeah.
guys. Thank you.
Bye.